All right, so just go ahead and get started and say new project, whatever. Of all the settings you see here, the only one that you actually kind of do want to pay a little bit of attention to if you're using the computers that we provide. I don't know about these computers in here, but specifically the ones in the DMC. I typically recommend that people turn off GPU acceleration because I mean those are like kind of old iMacs. They don't have discrete graphics cards, and so when you have GPU acceleration on without a discrete graphics card for the computer, it can cause some like audiovisual glitches, which like doesn't like necessarily damage your project, but it's just like very annoying and hard to. You basically have to then go into the settings and turn off the GPU acceleration and like restart the project to get it. So I usually always turn that off when I'm working at home on like my own desktop that I built, which has GPU. Like I can turn it on. It is helpful to have, you know, if you are using a computer that can handle it. Unfortunately, the ones we have right now at the DMC not really suited for GPU acceleration. I guess the other thing to note is so the location here, it kind of buries the project like relatively deep in file paths. If you're going to be working on projects at the DMC, we will ask that you change the location that it is saving the project to the Save Work Here drive, which is basically just like a larger external hard drive that is connected to the computer because like I think those things have like 250 gigabytes of internal storage, which is not a lot, and video projects are big. So other than that, just say sure. And so one thing that you will see, especially if it's like the first time that Premiere has been opened up on a computer, is that it will default to this learning tab. These tutorials are actually pretty good. They cover a lot of the basics very quickly. I mean, as you see, like, you know, all said and done, this is like 33 minutes worth of tutorials. They're like, you know, they do a pretty good job. I have looked through them myself, even though obviously I haven't edit, but you know, I just wanted to see what they had. And they're perfectly serviceable. In fact, watching them is probably akin to watching to you know to attending this workshop. But I like don't really like to edit in the learning tab just because you don't need this extra stuff on the side here. So I'll always flip over to editing. Because this is a square format projector, it is sort of really cramping the screen here, which is kind of unfortunate. But this is sort of this is probably what you're going to like. This is the tab that you're probably going to be working in most of the time, and it is going to look like this for the most part. Down here is where you have where your media will be, whatever you know, video or picture or audio things that you're working on with the project. This is what's known as the source monitor, which I'll get to in a second. This is the timeline, which is where you actually build your video, where you actually construct everything and make your edits. And then this here is like the preview, which is sort of similar to the source monitor in that it will show you playback of video, but it's referring to the timeline. So you're basically seeing the preview of the fully constructed, you know, with all your layers and everything. That's what that is for. So you can just click the import media to start, or if you know where your stuff is, I'm just going to click and drag it in. And these are just a number of clips I took from walking around campus with one of our cameras and a gimbal. So it's reasonably well stabilized video. So if you double click on a video, it will bring it up in the source monitor. And so I can drag this and scrub through the video. I can hit spacebar and let it play. And basically, what you're typically going to be doing with videos in the source monitor is you're going to be selecting what section of it. You know, trimming it down to what section you actually want to include in your video. So like, the back is turned, and I for in, and there. And so with what I was doing there is I was using the I and OTs to set the in and out of the clip. And of course, you see that I now have this sort of highlighted section. That is my selection, and these little bars here, I can drag them. I can drag them around to change it, or I can click and drag this entire bar to like keep the duration, but just change where it's coming in and out. And so then if I click and drag this from here into the timeline, now I have a video on my timeline. You saw there that it said that there was no sequence in here before I dropped this in. You can manually create a sequence if you have like specific settings that you want the sequence to have. So if I say sequence, so here there are a whole bunch of settings, video and audio settings that you can choose, which for the most part, you're probably not going to have to worry about because typically you're going to be working with video that is video that is all shot more or less the same, probably on the same camera or phone or whatever, right? It's all probably going to be coming from the same source. And so the reason why I didn't manually create a sequence is that when you drop a video clip into that timeline, it automatically creates a sequence with the settings that adhere to the video that you're dropping in. So if you're working with a couple of different options or a couple of different sources of video, if you have some stuff that you took on like a professional camcorder that's like really high quality, it's 4K or whatever, and then you also have some like cell phone footage, then you might actually want to manually create a sequence with whatever settings you want to be the default. Because if you like say take the cell phone footage and put it in first, and then drop in high quality 4K footage, first off, it will tell you that the sequence settings don't match, and it will give you the option to either match the sequence settings to the new clip or to basically downscale the footage to match the sequence clips. But again, typically you're probably not going to have to worry about that too much. And now we see that I have a preview over here. If I hit play, my clip plays in the preview monitor. So you see that we have V1, V2, V3, A1, A2, A3. These are video tracks. These are audio tracks. There is an audio track associated with this video clip, right? Because the video does have audio, albeit in this it's probably just like wind, against the mic of the camera. So not real audio, but technically there is. And so resize things a little bit. So I mean, this over here is just a audio meter. Give you a bit of a guide. You can scale you can change the scale of your timeline by clicking and dragging this, so you can kind of zoom in or zoom out as needed. When it comes to video clips that you are, video clips that you have in your timeline, you can edit them. It's not like once you've made your selection or whatever in the source monitor, that's it. You can still do basically everything that you could do in the source monitor in the timeline. If I hover over the edges of video clips, I can drag to shorten, I can lengthen it obviously out to a maximum of however long the clip is. Can't, make it longer than it was already. So in general, the source monitor is probably a better place to do it, because I mean, if I use the left and right arrow keys, I can go frame by frame basically, or these. So you can get a very tight selection of your video, which, you know, maybe you don't necessarily need, but like if you're trying to get precise in and out, source monitor is going to be easier than dragging, dragging the edge of this clip, especially because, depending on the scale, when you're dragging it, dragging it a pixel might be a millisecond or 10 seconds, depending on the scale of your timeline, right? So that is sort of that for trimming clips down to size. However, if you have a video where you want to cut something out of the middle of the clip, we can't really do that. Well, I mean, we can, in that we could, say have a start stop, set in and out with the out right before whatever you want to cut out, and then make another clip setting the in and out, starting after what you want to cut out. But that's very tedious. That is where this razor tool comes into play. I can select the razor tool and click in a clip, and it will cut up that clip where I do that. And so then I can select these sections of clips with the selection tool and just delete them as I see fit. One of the sort of curious things about it is like how I showed you could pull the edges of clips to lengthen or shorten, change where it's coming in and going out. You can do that with these cut pieces of clips too, because they're all basically the same clip. It's just a manually smaller selection. So like, despite the fact that I cut a whole bunch of stuff out there, I can extend that, and now it's back to basically just being the same clip, right? When you have sort of blank spaces like this, you can actually click on it and hit delete, and it will do what is known as a ripple delete, and it will take your clips and move them back so that they're like nice and touching whatever previous clips you have. That can be it's just a useful function because it's quick, and also because if I were to just click and drag this back, it does sort of snap. But if you but you can accidentally basically pull it over another clip, and you'll end up basically clipping off however much of that clip. And obviously Control Z, like pretty much all programs that works. Adobe applications in general have a pretty hefty buffer in terms of how far back it goes. So you don't have to worry too much about doing things that you can't undo. And I mean, at the end of the day, you still have all of your original clips, right? So none of this is destructive editing in any way, shape, or form. So you should be generally fine in that regard. One other thing about working with video clips in the timeline is you see that as I select these video clips, it is selecting both the video track and the audio track, right? In the event that you want to be able to manipulate them independently, for example, if you want to just delete the audio from a video clip like this, right? The audio is pointless for these video clips, and maybe I want to put in, I don't know, background music, but I don't want there to be random wind noises. You just right click and say unlink. And so now you see when I click and select it, I'm selecting one of the two tracks at a time. So then I can just delete that, and now I don't have audio for that clip. Okay, so let's go to graphics. Let's see how tiny everything looks in this square format. So the graphics pane brings up this essential graphics sort of sidebar here, where you will find all of your presets, where you find all of the preset options for titles and text. I don't know why it's not letting me actually scroll. There we go. So like say basic title here, which is literally just text in the middle of the screen. It's very simple to use these. So literally just click and drag them in. if I click and drag it in line with my video, or rather where there is no video underneath it, and by that I mean, okay, so one thing that I didn't necessarily say, but now is important to mention, these V1, V2, V3 video tracks are hierarchical. So whatever the top one is, that shows up on top. Which of course means if you stack a whole bunch of video clips that are the same dimensions, you know, if it's like 1920 by 1080, and I have 3 video clips that are all 1920 by 1080 and stack them, whatever the topmost one is what you'll actually see. That doesn't mean that the other ones aren't playing. And so if you have 3 audio tracks and 3 video tracks, you'll be playing 3 audio tracks simultaneously, which is another reason why you might want to delete audio, right? But typically, the whole point is whatever is on top is what you see, or whatever is on top is actually on top in terms of the video output, right? But so with the title, when there's no video underlying it, you end up with just white text on a black background. Like most text editing in like PowerPoint or whatever, it's very simple. You know, you can double click into it and change this. You have all of your standard text editing options, justification, size, color, you know, bold, italicized, all that sort of stuff, right? So like, you know, I can say make it bigger, make it smaller. Make it lime green. And so one thing you may have noticed is that when I double clicked into this, it automatically selected the text tool. And so when you're using the text tool, you can click anywhere in the frame of your preview, and it just creates a text box. And because I have a text, basically this is this purple, pink, whatever you want to call that color. This is a text layer. While I'm using the text tool where my playhead is hovering over that, whenever I create new text boxes, it will just sort of add that to this text layer. So then if I were to delete this, I would be deleting all the text from this section of the video at once. You can have different text layers if you want to sort of differentiate and all that sort of stuff, but like typically typically when you use the text tool to create new text layer or text boxes, it will stack it in the same layer. So if I were to take this and put it in video track 2 and lengthen it, like the videos, you can drag the edges to make it longer or shorter, but because it is like it's not a video, it doesn't have a set stop point, you can basically make it indefinitely long. Or to drag it over, you see that now it is basically on a transparency layer over top of the video. Okay, lime green is not the best choice. It's very hard to see, a little easier to see. So working with text, one of the other things to note is that when you're using the selection tool, you can move this text around, make it bigger or smaller, rotate it. You can change the center point, which is not something that you'll probably be doing much anyway, but so you do have a lot of options with regards to text in Premiere in terms of how you play around with it. That is certainly one of the main benefits compared to something like iMovie, where they have, similar to what we saw with the Essential Graphics, they have the presets. But you are basically only really going to be working with the presets. You can't really move the text around that much. You don't really have a whole lot of options in terms of positioning and all that sort of stuff. So and for what it's worth, if you don't want to use the preset, you know, titles or subtitles or whatever, you don't have to do that at all, and you can literally just make your own text boxes, and it'll make its own it'll make its own little text layer. So that's yeah, you have more leeway with that than in some of the other more common programs that we have people working with. So we go to the effects pane and we drop down the video transitions. You'll see that these are basically all the various transitions you can have in Premiere. Like a lot of them look kind of like mid-2000s PowerPoint transitions. Like, for example, I think this, once again, click and drag into the project because of the transition of clicking and dragging it in between two video clips. That doesn't look great. I mean, to each their own, right? Like maybe you want to use them, but like typically the ones that people tend to use, if they use transitions at all, because I think one of the things that people don't really get about video editing when they first start off is you don't actually have to have transitions in between every clip. The ones that people tend to use would be cross dissolve. So let me find where the edge of see different cross dissolve. Right, yeah, it's you know, fades in one clip, fades out the other clip. Or there's, you know, dip to black, where, right, you know, those are, I think, the two that are like the least offensive. And realistically, I would say that like even something like a dip to black only makes sense with some content. And cross dissolve too, to some extent, you know, only makes sense with some content, because the issue with cross dissolve is that because you have that sort of intermediary point where you have like basically 50% opacity of both videos, if you have a lot of like movement and craziness going on in either of the video tracks, it like gets to be this weird jumble of like visual information that is very jarring. So similar to extending clips or text file or text layers or whatnot in terms of length, you can also do the same. You can lengthen and shorten the transitions. Obviously, a longer transition means that it's a more gradual transition, but you also kind of lose out of having, you know, you kind of eat into the content on either side of the transition, right? Because it has to transition something, right? Shorter is obviously more abrupt. It's like, I mean, very long dip. Or you can go really short. Go down, right? Transitions, like it basically transitions, what it comes down to is like your own editing style, right? Whether or not you want to use them, completely up to you. But like this is where you would find them. I believe the default transition is cross dissolve. And so if you say Control D, it will add in cross dissolve. You saw that I click sort of the line in between two clips to select that intersection, and Control D will add a cross dissolve. You can obviously change whatever the default transition is if there's one that you prefer. But you know, as I said, most people, if they're using transitions, dissolve is like one of the most basic ones that people use. I'm not really going to get into lumetri color because I myself am not an expert in color grading video. What other topics? Is there anything so far? Do you have any questions?
Is there like a history thing like there is in like Photoshop, for example?
Not by default. Or actually, let's see. There is this, but the question is, where does it hide it? Because, okay, here.
Okay.
Yes.
That's first question.
Yeah. Which, again, like basically all of this this basically is a visual indicator of what your buffer is, right? In terms of stuff that you can go back to. So you could just hold down Control Z and go all the way back to reopening the project. I think that is I know that that's like taxing on the system, like on your computer system, that it holds on to so much information, but it's also very useful for media projects. So, you know, it is what it is. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about audio. Okay, so this is some nice royalty-free music that I found online. Double clicking this is just an MP3. This is just an audio file. Double clicking it will open the waveform in the source monitor, and it works basically the same as if I were trying to set the in and out of a video clip, right? So I can hit play and it's playing. And there we go. That's very nice. In here, jump all the way up here, grab that, sure. And so I'll drag this in, and that's my selection of the audio track. So as far as basic audio editing is concerned, there's like one thing that I do want to cover, which is like perhaps a little bit past basic, but I think it makes a really big difference in being able to, it's a small thing that makes a big difference in terms of the perceived quality of your video, which is basically automation, making your audio track be able to like fade in, fade out, you know, raise and lower levels, you know, pseudo dynamically across your track. So as you saw, I had to like, because everything's so tiny, I had to expand this track just to sort of see things a little better. You see that there's this gray line that sort of goes across the center of the track. That's my volume. I can raise this, I can lower it. That's obviously just raising and lowering volume. You can go basically to full mute, and you can raise it a ways. There are other ways that you can make it much louder than just by raising this. You know, by doing some actual audio editing in Premiere. But typically, people don't need to blast the audio. So basically, what you want to do for let's try and accomplish a relatively simple fade in for the music. You see now that I've expanded the audio track, and typically you will have to sort of expand it some to be able to see this, but you see that we have these like hexagons and arrows. And what these are keyframes. And so when I have the track selected, wherever my playhead is, I can hit this, and it will add a keyframe on this line. And what that does is that allows me to, I can move them laterally and up and down, you know, so realistically, you don't have to be exact about where you put the keyframes because you can change that. What that allows me to do is it allows me to basically set a path where I can say, okay, we're going to start from 0, and then it's going to come up to here, and it's going to play at that volume until I, you know, add another keyframe and move it around, right? You know, I could say, jump playhead over here and say, okay, well, let's make it quieter again. Jump playhead to here, bring it back up, right? And so now, I guess it's actually pretty gradual, but you get the idea. It, you know, it fades up, fades down, all that sort of stuff. And that's like one thing that that's one thing that I think is like super useful and like maybe sits slightly outside of like the basics, but like it's simple enough to understand. And like that, you don't have to like go diving through some of the other crazy panels. Like, I mean, we can go to the audio editing panel, but then it just gets very. I'm by no means a professional audio editor, you can do some funky things with these sliders where you can set it to different settings where as you can like hit play and like as the preview plays, you can like mess with these sliders and it will automatically add keyframes based on where you have moved the slider to the track. So you can like basically set a path by dragging up and down the slider. Is that better than just manually adding keyframes? I don't know. I guess in some situations it probably is, but for my purposes, usually I'm not like going crazy with like changing the volumes of everything, right? Okay, so audio, transitions, text, basic video editing. Is there anything else that you would like to know about some or?
So for text stuff, are there, so you can, if you presets, you can just like different text boxes. Is there a way to have text be like very basically animated? Like, are you able to set like
a motion path for it?
Yeah, like a motion path, or just like have it like, well, I guess it's just direction. Like, are some of the presets not just like title on the screen, like do any of them have fade in or fade out?
Oh, so that is a fairly good question. So much like I can add transitions to video, I can say dip to black or whatever, right? Oops. Okay, I don't know why it's doing this to the video. I've seen this like once or twice before on working on some of the PCs, and I wonder if it really is like the GPUs are just getting angry. Because obviously I did not mean to invert, colors or whatever this is, right? But you get the point that that like you can add transitions to the text to fade it in and out, or cross dissolve works because typically what a cross dissolve is doing is it's not cross dissolving it with anything else unless you add another text, or video or whatever after it. Typically cross dissolve, dip to black, all those transitions aside from like the weird page feel iris ones, aside from those, all the ones that are just kind of like a fade are just going to do what you're talking about, where it's going to fade up, fade down, all that sort of stuff. And obviously you can add it to both sides so that it fades in and fades out. But yeah, so as far as text is concerned, that is an easy way to sort of have that happen. If you are interested in sort of like animating the text, you can do that. That gets into a little bit more complicated things where, let's see. Controls. Yes, it is. So yeah, so it's been a while since I've worked with this. But oh God. I feel like, yeah, I feel like had I more space, I could actually take a look at things that I need to take a look at. There we go. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Such a cramped workspace. So toggling this, what you're doing here is you're adding keyframes, much like we were doing with the audio, and you can, yeah, see, it's like overlapping the position, which is where it's physically located in terms of pixel dimensions. You can kind of see it. You can see the keyframe button, but I can't touch it because it's behind the text box. On a properly sized screen, that is not an issue. But yeah, basically with that, what you're doing is you're going to be setting keyframes in this effects controls panel for the text or whatever you're trying to animate. And at each point, you're choosing where its position is, and it will basically track a linear path between the two. And obviously, you can do the same thing with scale. You can make it go bigger or smaller by, saying keyframe here. So this is like a start size, and then a second keyframe here, and have it bigger or smaller, and it will, again, linearly go from, whatever the first, setting A to setting B, right? And, you can do the rotation, that sort of stuff. But so that is like and that works for anything, right? That doesn't just have to be text, could be video if you want to. That seems weird to me, but actually now that I think about it, I have done that in the past, where I've had like video sort of shrink and like, start with like a full screen video and then like shrink into like a Brady Bunch style thing of like a whole, grid of videos, stuff like that, right? Realistically, probably you're going to do that more with like still images, but which again you can work with still images in Premiere. I think they're relatively friendly to a bunch of image types. You probably can't do PDFs because that's not really an image type. But like JPEG, PNG, and I believe TIFF all work. Probably PSD, maybe PSD. I haven't tested that one yet, I don't think. Because that has like layer information, which may or may not transfer over. But like all of your standard image types should work fine. Any other questions?
If you wanted to, create like some sort of combination of like a probably too complicated to do like a few minutes, but just kind of trying to figure out if you would do this within Premiere, like kind of final measure here. I wanted to do like text and then have it kind of some kind of like pointer from the text, which is like in one spot pointing to another spot of like background video, for example. And then
what do you mean by pointer?
So like
an arrow?
Yeah, something like that.
I believe that would run into After Effects.
Okay, so that'd be kind of okay. So
yeah.
It's mostly like just like kind of still text or like very basically with text.
Yeah. I think once you get to the point of like having
like actually designing
designing and animating shapes, I think that's where you start running into After Effects. Which like it's one of those things where it's like a lot of the thing After Effects sort of works very heavily hand in hand with Premiere. So like you are probably going to be doing some aspect of both to accomplish that. But I think at least to start off with, you're going to be sort of designing that in After Effects and then working with it in Premiere. I am not going to teach the After Effects class. I should get better at After Effects, but that is on the to-do list. Here.
I know the screen is kind of like
wonky.
Yeah, but is this the general kind of layout or workflow that you would, for most of the time, this is what you would be looking at for a general project?
Yeah. So I would say that typically this is what you're going to be looking at, where you have your media, your source, your preview, and your timeline, and this toolbar here, which I didn't really talk about much. Just to go over some of the other tools here, this track select forward, anywhere you click on the timeline, it will select basically everything that is in line with or beyond that track. That way, if you want to like say move some clips around to make space for you to add in some other stuff, you don't have to go, you don't have to do all that. I believe there is you know, you can also switch it up. The track select backwards for the same thing, just opposite direction. Ripple edit tool is not something you're probably going to deal with too much because, as I pointed out to you, you can the whole like deleting spaces. That's effectively what the ripple edit tool does. But with that, you can like delete clips and it will snap everything back to it, which like is nice. But again, you can get the same thing by just deleting the clip in place and then selecting the blank space and
That'd be in the razor tool to like cut the clip and be selected space.
right, or you know, or I could just, or if you just have a clip that you don't want anymore in your message.
Okay. Yeah.
The razor tool I already went over. The slip tool and slide tool are slightly different. So trying to remember which one it is. So I believe what the slip tool does is when you basically it allows you to maintain the bounds of your clip. But let me double check this actually. Here. Yeah, I believe it allows you to maintain the bounds of your clip, but just basically change the start stop point. Sort of like what I was doing here by like clicking and dragging this,
Okay, yeah.
but just in the timeline. And then the slide tool. I think the slide tool does the same sort of thing, but actually moves it in the timeline.
Yeah.
In either direction, right? Depending on which way you're pushing and pulling. Pen tool, that I guess this is your shape tool, where I've never really been good or know how to use the pen tool properly, so I can't really help you. But but it is you can create some basic graphics in Premiere directly.
Yeah.
But I mean I think for what you're talking about, you're probably still better off doing it in After Effects. But you know you can create. Gosh, I wish the preview was just working. But you can create, you know, simple shapes, and you know, change color and all that sort of stuff. With these tools, the hand tool, I think, literally just moves your timeline. So I feel like that's a kind of pointless tool, but sure. And then text tool we already kind of talked about. So once you are happy with where your project is, obviously the project auto saves like every 15 minutes or whatever, but what that's doing is saving your progress on the project and not necessarily a video that you can then share. For that, you have to go to export, media, and thank Lord, this time it actually brought up pain and didn't like crash the computer. Sometimes it does that. So as far as formatting is concerned for exporting, typically you can say match sequence settings and it will be fine. But what might be safer is to just say, for the format, just say H.264 because that'll save it as like a MP4. H.264 is like the most universally compatible video codec. So if you save it as H.264, you shouldn't be really concerned about whether or not this will play on another computer or if you can upload it to a site or wherever. It should always work. And then as far as the preset is concerned, match source is typically fine if you want to keep it whatever same quality your source material was. You see that they also have all these presets for Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Vimeo. If you know that is what you're doing with the video, feel free to use those presets. Like Adobe has done a lot of work, making them. I trust their judgment as to like they know more about what settings work best for all that stuff because I mean I'm not going to sit there and comprehensively test a whole bunch of different settings. Like they've done that work. I trust that they did at least reasonably well with that. So, and then like, down here, you can actually change all of the settings to be whatever you want. You can change frame rate, dimensions, audio settings. Typically, you don't have to. If you're just going to either match your own or use one of their presets, that's what I would typically recommend anyway. Obviously, you can change your output name and destination. Then, oh no, the export button is off the bottom of the screen. But you see that the options we have here at the bottom are export queue. Obviously, cancel if you don't want to. So export just automatically starts the export. It'll take some time, especially if you're doing like a longer video. It'll take some time to export. Typically, probably around like 1-to-1, however long the video is. Possibly longer if you do a whole bunch of effects and motion graphics and all that sort of stuff. Q is now while you're doing that, while you're exporting, you can't like Premiere is like spending all of its energy doing that. You cannot continue to work on projects, which is something to note. That is why Q exists, because basically what you're doing, you're saying, okay, here's the settings I want to export this as. I'm not going to do it now, but I'm going to basically save these settings that I'm ready to export at, and when I'm ready later, I will pop the queue and export the video, which is just generally good for workflow. If you're working on a whole bunch of video projects or a whole bunch of video clips, you can just queue them all up, and then before going to bed or whatever, just hit export, and it'll just run through the queue one by one by one. So I think that is pretty much everything I have. Hopefully that was helpful.